Welcome back once again. Today's game is from day 4 of the Champions Showdown in St. Louis, where all the participants played 12 rounds of Blitz. The game of our focus is Wesley So versus David Navara. And the reason I chose this game is because it features a very straightforward but effective attack. Wesley had the white pieces against Navara. He opened with knight f3, ready opening. Knight f6, we have g3, d5. Bishop g2, e6, castles, bishop e7, c4, black castle, and d4, going for a Catalan setup, characterized by pawns on c4 and d4, as well as having this fianchettoed king bishop. So here we have d takes c4 from Navara, queen to c2, preparing to regain the pawn, a6, a4, stopping b5, bishop d7, queen takes, bishop c6, posting the bishop on the long diagonal. And we have bishop to f4 from Wesley So. Bishop to d6, asking white the question about this dark square bishop. The most common responses are for white to go queen c1 and also bishop g5. But here Wesley played knight to c3, allowing the doubling of the pawns. But white in turn gets the open g file to use for the attack. Maybe this is a good decision by Wesley, since he now has a very clear plan which is important in speed chess. Now Navara plays a5, locking the queen side down and creating a nice square for the knight. e3 from Wesley. He first stabilizes the center before starting his business on the king side. We have knight a6, king to h1, knight b4, queen to e2, white's pieces belong on the king side. b6, rook to g1, queen c8, potentially forming a queen-bishop battery with queen b7. Knight to e5, now attacking the bishop. We have bishop takes g2, rook takes g2. White is now going to double rooks. And here c5 from Navara, a very logical move. Black tries to undermine white's center to get his own play. We have rook a to g1, g6, parrying the threat of rook takes g7. We have knight to b5 now from Wesley, wanting to meet c takes d4, with knight captures on d4. Queen b7 now, pinning this rook, and making things slightly uncomfortable for white. So Wesley goes h4, giving the king breathing room on h2. We have c takes d4, knight takes, king to h8. You would think that here Wesley is going to play the move king to h2, since that was the purpose of h4. But here he goes knight d to f3. And Navara's next move, rook a to c8, just reminds Wesley that his move was a mistake. The knight was needed on the d4 square to hold white's position together and guard this rook's entry into c2. So Wesley admits his mistake and he goes back. Knight to d4. We have rook f to d8, king to h2, and here rook takes d4. Navara decides to sack the exchange as to destabilize white's strong central presence. And now the rook comes in, rook c2. Queen to e3. White's plan remains very clear, just to try and achieve some pawn breaks with f5 and h5. Just to illustrate how potentially dangerous this position is, let's say black goes knight to h5, which on the surface looks harmless, but here after f5, e takes, white can rip open the king side with the move rook takes g6. And here another knight sacrifice. Obviously not perfect defense from black, but the point is that this is quite dangerous. So back to the main position. The move which keeps black safe in this position is king to g7, which looks counterintuitive since you're putting the king in line with the enemy rooks. But this protects the f7 pawn and frees up the black queen to provide ample defensive resources. For example, if white continues with his plan of f5, queen g5, threatening queen takes, here queen to e4, gives black just enough defensive resources. Something like this could continue. But here black is just holding on in this position. So after queen e3, Navara, who was maybe frustrated with this knight on e5, plays queen to c7, hoping to pin the knight after white goes f5. But here white can occupy the space left behind by black's queen, with queen to f3, now supporting f5 and h5 with the queen, and this is the line recommended by the engine. So here if knight takes, this would run into queen takes h5, followed by rook g8 mate. So king g8 recommended by the engine, f5. So the point of this line is that white managed to remove that extra layer of protection around the black king, and the engine thinks that this is great for white, but it's not so clear how white should continue this attack from a human's perspective. It's also unrealistic to expect long calculated lines in a blitz game. So Wesley goes for the most natural option. He plays f5 in this position. We have e takes f5, queen to h6. Now if black casually grabs the pawn on b2, then this runs into trouble after queen f8 check. Knight g8, king to h1 unpinning this knight, and the threat of knight takes f7 was pretty tough to stop. So after queen to h6, Navara played knight to g8. We have queen to f8, and with only seconds left on the clock, Navara blunders in this position. He plays f6. It was important to leave the pawn on f7 to keep the kingside structure intact. Instead of f6, knight d3 would have been a good try, trading off this annoying knight. But instead f6 from Navara, and now Wesley crashes through. Rook takes g6. Queen takes g7 mate, now threatened. We have rook takes f2. Now if black tries to defend with queen h7, this runs into a very pretty mate. Rook takes g8, queen takes, knight f7 check, and queen h6 mate. So here rook takes f2 tried by Navara. We have king to h3, rook f3 check. Desperate attempt to try and prolong the game, but simply knight takes f3. The game continued queen h7, rook takes f6, knight d5, rook takes f5, knight to e3, rook g5, queen d7 check. I'm not sure if Navara resigned or ran out of time, but this position is just lost. So the extra material and attack on the black king is just decisive. I hope you enjoyed this crazy game from both Wesley and Navara. Thanks for watching and have a great day.